The sun has left and forgotten me. It's dark, I cannot
Your stories
see.
don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Remember, friends, my job interview storytelling course is available on Udemy now, and it's an excellent resource, whether you're applying for a job, applying for a promotion internally, or whether you're a professional that just needs to know how to share the right story at the right moment so people know what you're good at. So you are the person they think of. You are the memorable person they think of when the right project or promotion comes up internally. You are in for a treat again today. My guest, Bryce Arii, was introduced to me by my brother, Eric Elkins, in Denver. And when Eric introduces me to somebody, my eyes light up because Eric has what's called connectedness in his top talents. And he just intuitively knows, intuitively understands who needs to meet whom. And he may not know why, but he always makes the connections that are going to be meaningful and helpful to one or both of the people he's introducing to each other. So, Bryce, thank you so much for joining me today on Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yes, me too. Well, after our first conversation, and actually, even before we talked the first time, I did a little Google stalking. I checked out your website. We connected on LinkedIn, and I was thinking about what an interesting and critical service you provide, bringing technology to organizations from the people perspective of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
immediately thought of my dear friend, Neil Hughes, who says all the time, technology is best when it brings people together. And reading
I
through your
love that.
website was generating so much curiosity for me about how you do that. So thank you for agreeing to do this.
Yes, absolutely.
So I always love to begin our conversations by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know about them. And I do that because so many times we are stuck in a particular version of ourselves. Not that we personally think that we're stuck in that version, although some people do, but it's more that other people often see us as a single dimensional being based on one interaction they had with us, or one story they heard, or one post on a social media site. And by sharing a story about yourself that most people don't know, it gives people a little more context and understanding of the complexity that each of us holds in our lives. So, what story can you share with us today?
Sure. As I was thinking about it, you were asking me about the nationality of my last name, Arii, right? So it's a Japanese last name, and like many Japanese families, our family kind of made the stopover in Hawaii on the way to the mainland United States, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a third generation American citizen, U.S. citizen. But that said, when those people were in Hawaii, there was a lot of confusion about how to pronounce our last name, right? Because it's the double I in Hawaii, the double I in Arii. It's really kind of confusing for people. And it's a family feud to this day. The story that I want to tell, though, around Hawaii is my great grandfather. So, um, my great grandfather, who I'm named for, Seikichi Arakawa. So, Bryce Seikichi Arii is my name. He owned Hawaii's largest poi factory. Um, so for
Which
those of
is
you
like
listening,
it's like a porridge, right?
yeah,
Poi.
yeah, it's kind of like a really gross potato, like mashed potatoes usually. um, so my grandma grew up on the farm. Anyways, he was very successful there in Kaneohe and Oahu. Had a very successful poi company. When he passed away, they audited his books and found that he had given millions and millions of dollars of poi to the poor in Hawaii. Um, and that kind of just struck me as a person as like, it's funny that I share his name because I'm a lot the same way. I have kind of like a bleeding heart, if you will. Hence the whole human centricity part of the way I live my life and the way I lead Humagined. So, yeah.
Oh, that's such a cool story. And especially because to me, it resonates because there is a Jewish tradition of generosity and sharing. And it is when you say you've done a mitzvah, it translates roughly to good deed, but it actually means commandment. You're commanded to do good deeds, to be charitable. And there are levels of charitability. And the first level is when you give and you know who's receiving and they know who's giving. The deeper level of mitzvah is when you give, but they don't know who gave. So they're receiving, you know who's receiving, but they don't know who gave. And then the deepest level of mitzvah is when you don't know who you're giving to and they don't know who they're receiving from. And your grandfather, your grandfather or great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather, yeah.
Great-grandfather, he didn't necessarily know who was eating his free poi, his donated charitable poi, and they didn't necessarily know that it was him that was sharing it with them. And that is the absolute deepest level of mitzvah. And that just warms my heart to hear that nobody even really knew what he was doing until he was gone. That's just, that's such a special story. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Bryce Arii. Wow. Tell me your middle name again. I want to own that.
Seikichi.
Seikichi. I want you to own that. It's not mine. Seikichi. And is there a translation for that?
I've tried to look it up a few times, and I haven't really been successful with it, but that was his first name. So
wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. That was a perfect beginning to our conversation. So, so that our guests or our listeners really understand, without telling us what you do, I would love to hear about a client experience that you had in the last few years that really demonstrates what you do for your clients.
Yeah, let me think of a really good one. I think it's hard to do it without saying what you do.
Right. I know it's tricky. Well,
right.
You can incorporate, obviously you have to incorporate some of it. Like when I tell a story about one of my clients who is an HR exec, and she was trying to move jobs. She saw the writing on the wall that her organization was going to be folding. And it was like this old company, and it had been around for a long, long time. And so she kept getting these first interviews, but she couldn't get to the second interview. She didn't know what she was missing. And after just a couple of months, she started getting second interviews after a couple months working with me. By the end of about 4 months, she had taken lots of interviews, many second and third interviews, had gotten 2 offers that she turned down, and then got her dream job.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, now I know how to tell this story.
Okay.
So I was working with this amazing client. She has a very successful business, been in business quite a while, and was really kind of looking for other leaders within her company, I guess. Really looking for some support and not just carrying the torch alone. And so we at Humagine, well, I won't talk about that part, but what we did was we identified a leader within her organization. And she actually was promoted to C-level leadership within that organization. And the energy that she brought, the just renewed focus, the renewed everything was just really powerful for this business. It's really been a transformative move. And it's really funny how sometimes it just takes an external person being with you in your business and saying, hey, I recognize this. What do you think? And it's like, oh my God, like
how did I miss that?
Right? My answer's been in front of me all the time, right? And just to see the way that the people in the business came around the person and supported this promotion and really followed the example and leadership, it's been amazing to watch. So
I love that. Okay, so now I understand a lot of the why of what you do, because I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. And I know our listeners are understanding how rewarding that is for you to see that experience happen. And there are two directions I want to go with this. One is if you could share the how behind identifying this particular woman. And then I'd like to go into that other side of the conversation that we started before I hit record about seeing people for what they can bring to the table, because you may have a very limited experience with them and not necessarily know what they're really capable of. So let's start with the how.
So our typical engagement starts with, there's a lot of consultants, they call it a discovery process, or just really getting to know a business. Our process is getting to know the business better than you know it yourself, and knowing all the aspects of the business. And for that reason, we're kind of focused in the 500,000 to about 2.5 million. And then we have a different process for bigger companies, but love focusing on the smaller companies. So during this discovery process, we do a workshop where we talk about what's the vision and goals for your company. Let's express what outcomes you want from working with us. Let's get into the details. So that looks at your operational processes. It looks at your leadership. It looks at your technology. It looks at all the different pieces of your business, your financials. And then we align what your goals are with what you have, and start prepping clients for scalability and like repeating processes, and just looking at ways, how can we strategize to make your business achieve its outcomes and goals? So we went through that process, and that's where part of that process is interviewing people and observing them kind of what I call in the wild, like in their roles. And I'm like, man, this person is just amazing at everything she puts her hand to, one. And she cares a lot about this. She has a lot of respect from all of the employees. Like, it just knows the business inside and out. So that's kind of part of the how we got to that process. And then since then, we've been just helping them execute on the roadmap that we've created together and build incrementally towards scalability. So, yeah,
and using technology to support that, as opposed to looking at the technology to build it. You're building the company and finding the technology that supports that building.
Yeah, definitely. And what the funny thing is for this particular client, we actually put in place a tech freeze for a while because it was like, let's go focus on the human elements first, and the processes from a human perspective with the tools and systems we already have. And let's learn that muscle memory of here's how we execute on a regular cadence. And then let's talk about where technology needs to go next.
I love that. And I think we've really, in many, many situations, really lost that sense of making sure that the technology fits your needs rather than you shifting your processes and procedures to fit the technology, especially if your processes and procedures work. I was a PeopleSoft consultant back in the late 90s. And one of the things that made this product so amazing was that the founder had worked with all these HR professionals and executives to design a software that could be implemented at almost any level. It was so expensive, so it was obviously a bigger organizational investment. But the whole idea was he worked with these people to design something that would streamline all basic HR procedures. And I would be brought in and the organization would be like, well, that procedure won't work for us because we do it this way. And I would say, well, yeah, but this is the streamlined way. And this is so that your approvals are cut in half and things move a little faster, but you still have, good visibles and all that stuff. And they're like, no, we really need to do it this way. So they would customize the software and ruin it, basically. Yeah. And then you'd have this whole different creature that would be implemented. And it was like a Frankenstein. And then they couldn't really upgrade easily because all these fields were customized. So you couldn't just immediately do the update. But what I love about what you're saying is that the idea is what are our processes? What are the best processes, and which technology can support that?
Right. Right. Right.
Oh,
If
that's
it's
cool.
if it's not supporting humans, then it's really not worth it. I mean, I've been in IT for a long time and done a lot of IT to people. For those, those of you listening that are in
I've
IT
done
understand
IT to
that.
people.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yes, I'm reading a book about libraries, and so much IT was done to those people.
Yeah, totally. Um, and I grew up as a kid just like watching Star Trek and loving Star Trek. And the thing that I loved most about Star Trek is Gene Roddenberry's kind of vision for how do we use technology to solve basic needs for humans and open up our mind to intellectual thought and exploration. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, how do we do that? Right? Like, how do we take all these really cool technologies and give us all the free time in the world so that we can continue to create as humans, So
Right.
that's really what
Oh,
we're about.
that's cool. That's so cool. I mentioned my friend Neil Hughes, who is a Tech Talks Daily podcaster and just phenomenal human. And when I started the No Longer Virtual conference, bringing people together that had only met on LinkedIn, it was 2017.
Wow.
And he's interviewed me a few times over the past few years to help promote the No Longer Virtual event, the summit. And every time he's like, this fits perfectly because I'm always talking about how technology is there to serve people and not the opposite. So yeah, that definitely resonated with me when I was reading through your website. So I'm so fascinated by this idea of being able to see a person that has all this potential that other people might have missed.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned before we hit record, one of the things that I loved about spending time with my friend in Ventura is that we've known each other since second grade, but we
Hmm.
only lived in the same city for less than a year. So I started second grade with her. Then I changed schools, but we still lived in the same city. And then she moved away. And when she came back, we went to the same school for 2 weeks in sixth grade. And then I moved to Colorado. And we were pen pals all those years. And one of the things I mentioned to you that was especially loving in seeing her, or I mean, we met when we were 8 years old, 7 years old. And yeah, we were seven. And she'll be 54 in a couple months. And I turned 54 in April. And we've known each other all these years. And every time we've seen each other, she has always just embraced whatever I bring. And I've transformed so many times in those years. I changed majors like 5 times in college. So, and it hasn't stopped. I've continued to just every couple of years, I'm doing something different. And she never hesitated to embrace whoever I was in that moment.
Hmm.
She never held on to the baggage of who she knew in second grade or when we were 15 or when we were 16 or when we were 23. And for you to be able to bring this person up and alert her organization to the magic she brings is
Hmm.
just such a powerful story. So, can you tell me a little bit about what made her stand out to you? I mean, you said she was respected by her colleagues. I guess a better question is, why were people missing who she was?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it really leads into a lot about my own personal transformation story too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like just in the fact that, I learned recently that I have some level of highly sensitive person, whatever they call it, HSP,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that I'm also empathic, which when you start to unpack what that means, like, there's different,
Mm-hmm.
like just recognizing or even sensing things in people, sensing the goodness about them, the darkness about them, all the different things. It probably sounds weird for a lot of listeners, but that's part of who I am, and like it's really served me well throughout my career. Um, And I think what was really missing in this particular case, or what was being missed, was just the level of impact. So like there are people like me that are HSP empaths that are in these large corporations. And I had this experience is like you're always promoting or creating opportunities for other people. And very rarely will you take something for yourself or try to promote yourself unless it serves promoting others, right?
Right.
So it's a really vicious cycle. But I just saw this person like continuously investing in other people, spending a lot of time outside of, her normal duties to really create opportunities for other people. And I'm like, wow, this is the type of person you want in leadership. We do teach kind of like a new sort of style to executive management, which is more about how do we empower and create opportunities for our employees? How do we support our employees in doing what they want to do versus top-down traditional management structures of like, you will do this, right? Now there has to be direction, right? So we're not like a hippie firm by any chance, or any stretch of the imagination. But when we see people that have this internal drive and desire to really promote people in support of where the business needs to go, it's like, why not start talking to those people? And why not bring them to the front and get the recognition that they deserve? Just because as an HSP empath, you're really not getting that attention that you deserve usually.
Right.
Almost
and you
universally.
don't necessarily want the attention.
Right. Yeah.
But it's I think it's more about people recognizing the impact that you have and your potential.
Yeah.
And so I'm also curious about how did you learn this about her? Was it by asking her questions, or was it more about asking her colleagues the questions?
A bit of both, to be honest. So I'm also trained in professional coaching. So when, the big thing is powerful questions, right?
Right,
coaching.
Of course.
Yeah. So
hence my podcast.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, right. And so like just asking those powerful questions and open-ended questions for those of you who are listening and don't know powerful questioning. It just opening up the ability for her to talk about the why behind, because it's really easy to say like, here's my checklist of stuff I do every day or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then here's where the process I think gets broken down, and it's another thing entirely. And why it matters that these people that I lead are on the team, like what matters to them is, and I'm like, wait a minute. So what matters to the business, what matters to you, what matters to your team, like, and you know what I mean? It's like a perfect alignment.
Right.
I don't see that very often at all.
No. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah. And were you also observing her with her colleagues sometimes and just watching how she asks the questions? Yeah.
And there was just like this humility behind everything too, like the recognition that, I do recognize the impact I'm having. And it's more about the success of everybody versus me being in the limelight. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when was a recent time that you had an opportunity to see the impact that this shift is having on the organization overall, and particularly on the executive director who needed somebody with that kind of energy to help with sustainability and growth, and especially succession planning?
Yeah. So we kicked off a process project together. So we've been kind of sharing the responsibility for that. And what's really amazing to me is like, we'll come up or co-create with ideas, and like, she'll push back and saying, well, this is how we've done it. Does it make sense? Or like, she starts to ask the powerful questions of me too, like,
right.
Like, what
are we changing for the sake of change, or are we doing it? I mean, is this going to actually improve something?
Yeah. and
Yeah.
just asking the challenging questions. So what we've seen is now very streamlined processes and very, very uh, just the team. I think one of the most recent quotes was, "Wow, the team has not felt so good in so long." Like they're feeling really good
Oh,
about where we're
wow.
at. Um, and I'm like, man, that's an improvement right there, right? So
That's huge. It's
yeah,
huge because people want to be there. And
yeah.
I'm curious, was she that confident when you met her, or is part of this coming from the trust that people are putting in her and that acknowledgement that she has a lot to contribute?
I think it's a bit of both. I do.
Mhm.
I think the potential and the drive was already there, and it was just
Mhm.
like a maybe a little bit of like a almost like an empowerment in of itself. Like you're now the leader. Now it's time to like you know
Step
do the
into
leadership
this.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And
And
was she ready for it? I mean,
oh
did
yeah,
she, I know she was ready for it, or you wouldn't have even put that effort into it, but did she know she was ready for it?
I I think so. I think it was one of those things where it was just that last needed step of alignment where somebody actually just called it out and said, "Have you thought about?" And it's like, "Oh my God, like that's crazy, right?" Like it's just
Right.
wow, wow. Like, and just when you lay out what somebody's doing for the company and the organization, how well they know everything, it's just like, how could we not make the decision to move forward, you know?
Right. Right. Well, I'm asking these questions because so many times somebody else sees our greatness, sees our magic before we can really see it in ourselves. And even
Yeah.
if we know we're good at certain things, to take that next step, especially people with that, I'm not going to call it a syndrome, but the imposter phenomenon, where
Yeah.
they're just not sure they're ready for the next thing. And most women will not put themselves forward for a promotion unless they tick every box that's requested, where men will do it if they only have 60% of the boxes ticked. And
Hmm.
so I'm asking these questions because I think a lot of people in leadership positions need to know that women
Ah,
won't
yeah.
put themselves forward unless they are given that thumbs up, like, you need to put yourself forward for this because you have what it takes and you will learn what you need to learn to contribute and grow in this position.
Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, I think so. I also think, and not to steer this any specific direction really, but in terms of like the highly sensitive, empathic people, whether they're male, female, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
transgender, in your organization, that you those type of people also are not going to assert themselves either. And in
Right.
fact, they're the ones that are the most likely to burn out because they're promoting everybody else above themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I feel that. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like that has been me over the years. And so
Yeah.
I feel that it's part of why I left certain organizations, is because I felt like I was being taken advantage of. And then I'd come back and look at it and see where my role was in it. I'm like, oh, well, of course, because I kept doing that and I didn't expect anything in return and I didn't put myself forward. So of course that happened.
Right.
But at the time it felt, it would feel good, feel good, feel good, feel good. And then it just didn't.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as leaders, I think that gives like people like you and I that have this kind of others promoting quality,
Mhm.
um, that it just affirms that we also need to take some of the credit for ourselves. That's actually like at least for me, it's a secret need, right? Like to at least be
Mhm.
recognized and thanked for it, every
Right.
once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But people don't know unless we tell them.
right, right.
Yeah, I think about that when my husband and I were first dating, and we were on our way up from the DC area to Wilmington, Delaware on I-95, and we had left late enough so that we weren't like bumper to bumper traffic. But I hadn't eaten after work, and I was hungry. We were going to have dinner with my aunt up there, but I remember we're driving. He's driving, And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so hungry." And he's like, "Yeah, me too." And then he passes the next exit with food. And then I see another sign that there's food at the next exit. It's whatever fast food. I just needed a snack, but I didn't say that. I said, "Oh, I'm really hungry now." And he's like, "Yeah, me too." And he drives by the exit. And I'm finding myself getting hangry and frustrated. And at some point, I heard this voice in my head. I don't know whose it was, because it couldn't have been mine at 25, right? Or 26, but it was, "Sarah, use your words. He can't read your mind." And I see the next sign, I said, "Can you stop at this McDonald's? I just need a hamburger, just a single, 99-cent hamburger, because I'm getting hungry enough to get a little nauseated." And he's like, "Yeah, of course." Like, and if I had just said that the first time, instead of being this passive aggressive, and I think so many of us, especially when we've worked in a place long enough, we think they should just know.
Right.
So when have
Right.
you done that? When have you had that aha and actually gotten your needs met because you used your words?
I think it's a few times. I started actually, I have to say it was a leader, I think, that was above me finally. That was like, "Hey, you're empowering other people. I see that, and I'm going to empower you now." And some of the coaching I got from this leader was, let's be really clear about why and what you want to do. And I was like, I help my clients with that all the time. This was at a previous consulting company.
Uh-huh.
And why and what do you want? And I was like, well, here's what I want. I want to make partner in the firm and blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah, so why? And
Why
I
do you want
really
it?
had to,
Right.
yeah. So I was like, okay, well, why do I want it? And that kind of kicked off this whole series of like uh self-reflection, self-transformation, where it was really about like, well, I want to do that because of the unlimited potential of the people that I would be leading to go and do really, really transformative things. And just like have this really huge impact on not just the clients, but the people that worked with me, the people that I interacted with on a day to day. But long story short, I went out as an independent shortly after that because because I realized that that I wanted to do it my way, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so there was like it was this huge realization, and it was a really kind of interesting and difficult reflective time because it was like, well, you had everything seemingly that you wanted and a good path towards it. So why the pivot? And it really, really came down to the why. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's so important that we reassess, we take inventory all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
every time we are working towards something, having somebody, a coach or a friend that is different from us, ask us those hard questions that we're not necessarily willing to ask ourselves. Yes, you're driven. Yes, you want this. Do you still want it? You wanted it 5 years ago and you're
Right.
working your way toward it. Maybe you wanted it a year ago. Do you still want it? Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, you need to pivot now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not having a regret conversation a year from now. Oh, I wish I had done this a year ago. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it was such a fascinating time. And I remember this one story about that really helped me make this decision. And um, I was on this really, really intense project for like 6 months. And it was intense. There was 13 people that were on my team, and I was leading these 13 people. And it was a rescue project, so it was really rough for
Mm-hmm.
those that are listening that don't know what a rescue project is. It's like a consulting disaster, and you got to recover it, right? So, figure out a way forward, make the client happy, and look really good at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very, very intense. And I remember getting to the end of the project and we had a team dinner and it was time for us to all get disbanded to whatever other projects we were going to go to. And there's like this sadness of one, like not working with me any longer, especially from some of them. A sadness with just in general of not working together. And I sat down to reflect, like, why the sadness, like it.
Right. We just had this successful project. Why are we not incredibly celebrating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and kind of what I learned is through that was I was such a protector of these folks and like, I went to bat for every one of them, at some point during this project. And I was such a big part of this, which is weird for somebody that's like, in my position to even recognize that or say
Right.
that on a podcast, nonetheless.
But you were the advocate. You were the one. Right. I get that.
Yeah. And what I learned from that was I screwed up. And what I should have been doing is empowering these individuals to see their part in it, to build up their strengths, to make them leave that feeling fully capable and having loved the time that we spent together and not having a dependency on me as their leader. And so it was like one of these moments where I'm like, wow, I am an empowering person and I'm so empathetic towards people. What I can't do is continue to protect people. I need to live what I believe and empower them and show them the way forward or help them realize the way forward. And I think that's the moment when I knew it was like, you got to go do your own thing because I don't think business really works that way. So
I have such mixed feelings about this, Bryce, such mixed feelings about this story because I had so many bad experiences at work where I didn't have an advocate, where I didn't have somebody to believe in me and empower me. And you did that for these people. They had this experience of having a really good boss, probably for the first time in their careers.
Sure.
And they may have been sad in that moment, but I promise you that they knew what to look for in the next thing.
Yeah.
And most of us, we have such bad experience after bad experience from leaders and managers. We rarely have a good manager. We rarely have an advocate in the workplace. And I worked in the public sector for around almost 20 years. And it was rare to have somebody like you to be a leader or manager. So I agree that there's this aspect of it that maybe you could have prepared them a little more to take on the next thing and not be so sad. But at the same time, I would love to see you own that you showed them what it could be, which means you modeled what a leader looks like to them. And now they can be leaders like that because the only thing they knew before, likely, I'm just generalizing here. Likely the only thing they knew before was bad management. And most of the time we emulate that because it's all we know. Right. But now they know better.
They do. And the amazing thing about those 13 people is they're all in very senior roles wherever they went to now. So it's great to see, how they've evolved and grown over time too. And that's been many, many years now. But we're still in touch. Yeah.
It's such a good story.
Yeah. And like I'm so proud of everybody I've ever worked with and just seeing, because the only thing you can do as a leader is open a door or give somebody an opportunity or a chance to really show themselves and coach them through it in a way that it feels like they own it, and they do. And once they own it, it's like this unstoppable force, right? So that's kind of how I've led my entire career. And just, you can see everybody that has ever been a subordinate of mine, probably way more successful than I am now, right?
Well, it depends on how you define success, but yes, sure, I hear what you're saying.
Maybe more financially successful.
Maybe they have a very high level position that comes with a lot of money, but that does not represent success to me. So
sure.
Yeah.
So and so I mean that's just it's been really, like you're saying, it's a transformative journey. Every
Every time.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, Bryce, for our listeners listeners, all of Bryce's contact information will be in the show notes associated with this podcast at elkinsconsulting.com. But Bryce, what do you want people to know as you're talking to 1,000 or more people? What do you want them to know?
I think there's two things. One is, as a professional coach, what drew me into it was every human's creative and whole. So every human is enough for whatever it is. That includes all humans. So
yes,
like all humans. So
every single one.
If you're human and you're listening to this, or if you're listening to this and understanding, you're probably a human, right? So you are enough. I think that's really important. Sometimes you just need to hear it, And second of all, you have the opportunity to reshape at any time, pivot, redo, start over, whatever it is. And every time you do, it takes tremendous strength. But I would say strength and courage, right? And I'd say that the thing that I've learned most, it's like Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why.
Right.
Always start with what's the why behind whatever it is I'm going to go do. If you want to make more money, why do you want to make more money, right? If you want to, do you want to just upgrade to the onion rings at the drive-thru, or like, what's your why, right? Do
you want to retire, right?
Yeah.
And without judgment, you need to really know yourself. Yeah. Without judgment. And whether that why is just because you want to go buy a boat, or you want to live without having to worry about money, or whatever the why is, don't judge yourself. Just be there with it, live in it. Absolutely.
And if that means, look, you aren't as financially successful and as your peers, and you're transforming the way that your peers work, that's okay too. I think there's different elements of what success looks like. And to me, really, that's where I found my big why is, what does success really mean to Bryce? It means making a huge impact on people. So, yeah. And you do. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we met. Eric Elkins, thank you for another fabulous connection. Oh my gosh, love that guy. And not just because he's my brother. For sure. No, he's an amazing person. Yes. Thank you so much, Bryce, for your time. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. Happy to be here. Listeners, now it's your turn. I'm really curious about where you will take the messages that you got from this conversation with Bryce, Arii, and me. And if you're a leader, who are you missing their potential and why? Is it because you're only seeing them as one component of who they are and what they do? Or are you seeing them from the past, an experience you had with them in the past that maybe they have transformed since then, and you might be missing something really important in terms of their potential for impact in your organization? And are you that person that has that potential? If you are, you cannot expect somebody like Bryce to swoop in and save the day. You cannot expect somebody to see your greatness and catapult you to stardom. That's not how it works most of the time. So I would really encourage you to think about how you can share your competency, the things that you do really well, and the why behind it with people around you through your stories, because that is what will help people see you beyond what their direct experience has been so far. Thanks so much for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You. How you tell them will. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.